welcome to Godshots, the podcast. This is our
Hi,
first actual, hi. I have an amazing guest today, Darlene Sperlaza. Tell me if I'm mispronouncing your name.
it's
But
correct.
Darlene is we both discovered Godshots, not simultaneously, but in separate parts of the country. And we came together in a very serendipitous way that I think can only be called a Godshot. It's synchronicity.
Yes.
And first, I'd like to interview Darlene and find out, where are you from, and how did you have your first God shot, and what is your story? What is your background? How did you find God?
Okay, well, my name is Darlene Sperlaza, as Lydia said. I am from a little town called Weirton, West Virginia, that if you look at a map, it kind of looks like this being the northern panhandle at the very, very tip. So I'm about
Oh,
30 minutes west of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so kind of close to a major city. My background is I'm a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner. I'm I work at a university currently, and I created a website called Godshots, and that's how Lydia and I met. Serendipitously is probably right. I created that website about 4 years ago. The Godshots go way back. The Godshots go back probably about 20 years. I just didn't know what they were.
me too.
At the time I started getting messages from God, I didn't know who they were from. I didn't know what they were for. And I didn't really put too much stock in it until June of 2002. And in June of 2002, I've had a lot of tornadic activity, if you will, in my life, ripping and tearing and doing things I probably shouldn't have done, and not being the kindest I should have been, and not really recognizing any of that, just kind of living in my own world. And in June of 2002, on a Wednesday afternoon, I was in a small Catholic church here in Weirton. I did have faith, and I was on my knees by myself, and I was just praying to God. I'm like, what do you want me to do? What am I supposed to do? What's wrong with me? Why can't I seem to get it right like other people do? I looked at the whole world as getting it right, and me as getting it wrong.
Right.
And I heard a voice, just like you're hearing my voice right now. And that voice said to me, go to AA. Wow. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know who it was. I looked through that whole entire church. I'm looking under pews. I'm looking in little closets. And I'm like, who's talking to me? And
you,
like,
you
like
looked
I,
under the pews. Oh, that's
yes.
funny. That's
I
funny.
had no idea that God could actually speak. Never had I heard that before. And unfortunately, it took me the next 18 months to actually walk into my first meeting at AA. And I look back on that now, and I think that 18-month period got really crazy. My drinking increased exponentially. I felt like I was starting to fail at my jobs. I felt like I was failing more at life. And my life dramatically changed. Like when the Bible talks about you change in an instant,
Yeah.
the day I walked into my first AA meeting, which was April 24th of 2004,
Wow.
I became a new being. Now, I didn't know that was going to be my trajectory, but that's kind of how it happened for me. So that's kind of my story of how I got to understand a little bit about Godshots.
Wow. When you first walked in, 18 months later, what was that pivotal moment when you actually did walk in the door? Did something happen the night before, or was it you hit your bottom maybe?
I think I had hit my bottom. And you know what? The weird thing is, I never had any police involvement. I never had any problems. I never had any problems with my licenses. I mean, I'm a nurse practitioner. I'd never had any of those issues. But emotionally, I was bankrupt.
Me
I
too.
just I could not find happiness anywhere, no matter how. I had everything. I had nice cars. I had nice clothes. I had a beautiful home. I had a wonderful husband. I had it all. And yet I was so miserable. And I was just like, something's got to change. And that particular day that I walked into my first meeting, I went kicking and screaming,
Yeah.
as a lot of us do when God has a directive. We kind of no, I won't. I'll do anything for you, God, but I won't do that, right?
Exactly.
And
That's
so
so
I
funny.
remember walking into the very first meeting, and I sat there, and the weirdest part of it was I went to a 1 o'clock in the afternoon meeting because I thought anybody that's normal will be working. So I don't have to worry about seeing anybody.
Oh boy. There's that ego. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So when I walked in, I listened to all of the people, and I thought, wow, they're saying things that I'm understanding, but I don't know why, right?
Hmm.
And when I got up to leave, I had every intention of never going back. That was my thought.
Wow.
And I picked up my purse, and a gentleman that became my best friend in the room of AA come up to me, shook my hand, and said, "Welcome. My name is Nick." And I just started crying. I mean, just sobbing. It just all started coming out.
That
And
happened to me too.
and at that point in time, he panicked because he didn't expect that from me. And he's yelling for women. He's like, "Come and help me." And so it was it was immediately, I was surrounded by this beautiful group of women that gave me a big book, told me I had to do 90 meetings in 90 days to keep coming back. And they took my hand, and I know God had them there and just led me every step of the way.
Okay, I'm getting chills. I'm getting chills right now because I've never really heard your story. And there are two huge God shots just happened to me. And by the way, a God shot, Einstein said, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And that's a scientist, one of the most famous scientists that ever lived. And he could not understand the mysteries of the universe to the point where there was a certain point where he could not explain it anymore. And synchronicity, Jung tried to explain synchronicity mathematically, but it really is this invisible evidence. To me, every time I get a coincidence too uncanny to be anything but it's supernatural almost. It feels like a tingling, magical
Yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Synchronicity so uncanny and profound that it couldn't be an accident. It's not random. And I've found that I call them God shots, you call them God shots. And I was very careful about naming it a God shot, but I kept hearing this in AA. I had so many of these. I started writing and trademarking the term God shots in 1994 when I got sober, September 11, 1994. But the same thing, I came into the rooms, I was sobbing. The minute I raised my hand and surrendered and admitted it, a river of tears flowed out of me. I couldn't stop crying. And then I was enveloped by a group of women that lifted me up. And then the magic happened. Some amazing coincidence happened that I could never imagine happening if I hadn't been in that room. So it's so weird that you had almost the same experience and the
yes,
same feelings, of course. So go on, tell
yeah.
me more. Tell me more
So,
about.
well, so then that journey started in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And of course, it was right around that time that I heard, like it wasn't external, like I heard the first time, but it was internal, like do God shots, write about God shots. Well, I didn't even know what that meant. So I made a little notation in my journal and just let it be, right?
Yeah.
And so pretty much for the next, I don't know, 10 years, it was just a wonderful journey. And I just kept walking and kept meeting people and kept doing things. And then my life started getting a little crazy. They'll say life happens, right? And you just have to deal with it. So I think
Yeah.
it was probably about year 11, I started having sad things happen in my life. My sister-in-law that was 35 was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, and she passed away 11 months later. On the heels of that, one of my good friends that I was sponsoring in AA gets brain cancer and passes away.
I'm
Then the
sorry.
man that had shook my hand in the meeting got cancer and he passes away. Then my husband was diagnosed with the same type of cancer. And so I'm getting back to back to back sad things happening. But through those sad times, the God shots were increasing, just increasing. An example of, oh, this is a great example. So my sister-in-law that passed away, she had a butterfly tattooed on her foot. She loved butterflies. And my brother and her had been married short of 2 years by one day when she passed. So they were very young. It was very difficult. I had been her caretaker. And about, I don't know, 4 weeks after she passed away, I was riding my bike around the neighborhood and I was just sobbing and I was just praying, praying, praying. And when I came home, I noticed something under the tire of my car. And I'm like, what is that? So I pull my bike into the garage and I look, and I had to actually back my car up to see it fully. But there was a beautiful yellow monarch butterfly, untouched, wings intact, the cylinder body intact, the antennas intact, there, not alive, but there. It's still to this day in my Bible under tape and has not disintegrated.
Oh
I think
gosh.
it was my sign that she's okay, you know?
Absolutely.
My friend from the rooms that passed, I had the opportunity to actually sit and talk with him 7 days before he passed. And we were talking about, I know this, you shouldn't probably do this, but we did. And it was like, what will be my sign? You know? And he's like, well, what do you want? And I said, white feathers. 24 hours after his passing, I opened an envelope that was mistakenly had been in my desk drawer for over a year. And it was from a religious organization. It was like a monthly reading book, like a little pamphlet. I don't know how it got there because I usually put those in other places, but it was in with my envelopes that I needed to do some schoolwork with. And I pulled it out and I threw it in the garbage. And then it was like, no, don't throw that away. It was kind of here, don't throw that away. So I pulled it back out and I looked to see what it was. And when I opened that magazine, I wish I had it here to show you, I don't, but it had all white feathers over the front of it. And it said, my journey to heaven and the life thereafter.
Oh my God.
And the whole book.
I got tears in my eyes when you said that, when you said the feathers. Oh,
You have somebody special with feathers?
no, just the fact that you had a Godshot that intense. I had
Yes,
so many of those. And you
yes,
have to tell people think you're crazy sometimes. And I go, no, if it's so true in my heart,
yes,
and I have visible evidence, I've had actual tangible evidence of miracles. There's
yes,
no doubt in my mind that this is a God wink, a God shot, a piece of joy for us to share and to realize
yes,
there really is no death. I know there's no death. I
yes.
had so many experiences of that, but nothing
Agreed.
occult. It's not a cult. It's not
No,
something weird. It's simply the natural order of the universe. The universe is, we're spiritual beings, and we're here in this incarnation, in this life, to enjoy, to
yes,
experience joy and happiness, and
yes,
and even the physical senses. We're supposed to enjoy food and art and each other. You
yes,
know,
yes,
it's not a
agreed.
life of misery. It's not a veil of tears.
That's
So
correct.
wow, I
That's
love that,
correct.
those
And
God
so
shots.
then bringing it to you. So I have multiple experiences like that. And so this was just another serendipitous moment that I said, I think I want to put these God shots on a website so people can read them and I can have interaction. And I wanted it all over the world. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to talk all over the world about God shots, right? And so I didn't know how to do that. I'm not techie. I don't know how to do all this stuff. So a friend in AA knew somebody that did know how to do it and connected me to a man that lived in Roatan, South America, the island off of South America. So we talked and I told him what I wanted to do with my little short stories and make this website. And he goes, oh no, I'm not interested. I said, okay. About 2 weeks later, he calls me back and he's like, I can't get this out of my mind. I think I'm supposed to do this, right? So he puts this website together. And I know you've seen it, Lydia. So a lot of
Yeah.
my stories went up there and he did a fabulous job of translating it into multiple languages for multiple countries. And it's a very, very well done website, in my opinion.
Beautiful.
And so this is kind of where our God shot comes in because it's funny.
Ah.
So I really didn't know what to do with that web shot other than to just keep adding stories to it and keep watching the number of people that were reading it and see where God would take it next. And I prayed all the time. I'm like, God, like I'm putting all this stuff out there. What do you want me to do? And so then I get a letter from an attorney,
Oh
and
my gosh.
it got my attention. It said cease and desist.
Oh,
And I was like, what? I mean, I've never been in trouble. So I was like,
oh God.
So I read this letter. I call my son, who's an attorney, and I said, I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? And he's like, well, he goes, you really can't do anything. This is trademarked. And he goes, I'm surprised because I had done it legally. He goes, I'm surprised that nobody noticed this. And he goes, just try to write a nice letter and see what you can work out. And I said, okay. So I write a letter to the attorney, and then I get this woman that sends me this note and says, call me at such and such time. And I'll never forget it. It was Wednesday and a California number. And I got to tell you, I was like a little bit annoyed because I was like, who is this person that's like going to damage my website?
I know. I felt so badly about that.
Oh, that was so great though, because so for all of you people that are listening, it's absolutely hysterical. And it goes to show you, don't ever judge. So I call her up and, we're talking about Godshots, and she's like, are you in recovery? And I'm like, yeah. And we had this beautiful conversation about God, about the fact that she was looking for somebody to work with on Godshots and I was ready to go with both guns about why I needed to keep my website active, and it didn't go that way at all. And so this is the best part. I had no idea who Lydia Cornell was, none. And so after we hang up, I'm like, well, this woman, if she has a trademark, surely I can find something out about her on the internet, right? So I Google your name, and the first picture that comes to me is a picture of you with your hands on the Hollywood star. And I was like, now remember, I'm from West Virginia, and I'm going, where have I landed?
Oh my God.
So it was very humbling to me because, believe me, it put me on my knees, and I said, wow, this is better than anything I could have ever planned, putting together a website. Ever.
I see. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I wasn't I had this very deep intuition, which I call my God voice. When God speaks to me, it's a gentle, loving, soft, easy presence. It's always the answer that's not fear-based. And I immediately knew we're supposed to work together because you have that beautiful spirit. I knew it. And it was weird. It was like I wasn't about to haggle over something God created anyway. It's not, I want to share it. I want to blossom it. I want to grow it. And you're the perfect example of a completely pure soul who's got my story almost. It's just a perfect synchronicity. Yeah.
And so it has been an extremely fun journey since. And
we're just starting,
Yeah. I know, and waking up every day and saying, okay, what's next? And I get excited about that. So
good. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of Godshots since, a lot of Godshots before, and they keep coming, which is just incredible to me.
Have you noticed that I feel for myself to experience them, and I had a slew of them. I was sober in 1994. Now I'm 25 years sober now, by the grace of God. Yay. And I started this a Facebook page called Recovery Godshots. So it's about the kind of things we discover in recovery. And then I ventured out into real life and found them everywhere. Mm-hmm. But it's when I'm in a state of surrender, when I'm in a state of peace, and I'm not focusing on problems, politics, worries, fears, premeditated anxiety or self-pity. Yeah. I used to say, the only medication I'm on is self-pity. That's like one of my favorite lines. But when I'm really gentle and I'm happy with the world, I'm in a state of happiness, everything, I start seeing them more and more. So tell me some of the ones you've seen or had or you've heard of on your website, or your most, one that you've experienced that you love to talk about.
Well, you know what? I guess there's two that come to mind. And I'm going to start with one that we've talked about, which was my cigarette gotshot. I call
Oh,
it my
good.
cigarette gotshot. But
Coincicence.
of course, part of my story is like I started smoking at a very young age. And I just thought that, I grew up in that era where Virginia Slims were all the rage. And I just thought that, that helped me to look really sophisticated, I guess. And
Yeah.
so I did. I smoked for quite some time. But I knew at some point, when I was seeing patients and telling them the bad things about smoking, that you shouldn't do this, I was being very convicted in my own heart. Like, how can you sit here and tell somebody that, and you're going out and sneaking behind the building at lunchtime? So I thought, okay, this has got to go. And
Yeah.
for 3 years, it's the weirdest thing. And folks, all I can say is this: if God starts knocking, he's not going to change his mind. He'll just continue to knock and make the knocks a little bit harder. So, for 3 years, it was very, I kind of intuitively knew I need to quit, I need to quit, I need to quit. And I was playing with this all around Lent. And, I would kind of intuitively know I should give up smoking. And I would be like, oh no, I'll go to mass daily for 40 days. And I did. But that isn't what God asked me to do. It's a nice thing, but it isn't what he wanted. He wanted me to
Right.
quit. So for 3 years, I did that. On the third year, when I kind of intuitively knew that I needed to quit smoking, I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. I've done everything else you've asked me to do. I'm not going to quit smoking. And I walked away, right? And the next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck. And I just thought, okay, I slept funny, whatever. And it kept happening. It just was there, this stiff neck. And I had a doctor friend of mine take a look at it. And I had one hot lymph node on one side. Now, for those of you that aren't medical, that just means that I had a swollen lymph node that was creating that stiffness. And so I took a 10-day course of antibiotics and it did not go away. And usually it will if it's some type of infection. And so I went back to see my doc and he looked at me and he goes, did you take all the antibiotics? I'm like, I sure did. And he goes, okay, you're a practitioner. What's the next steps? Which really sobered me because I was like, well, this could potentially be lung cancer. And he goes, that's right. And I said, so I guess a chest x-ray is the next right thing. And I had fear just envelop me, fear.
Oh, man.
So he actually had an x-ray room in his office. And I said, please do the x-ray here because I just anticipated this being horrible, right? And I got in the x-ray room. He took the x-ray. I'm standing there by myself and I'm looking like at the corner of the room. I'm just looking up in the corner and my knees were like actually felt like they were going to give way. And I heard a voice. Second time I've heard God's voice, and both of them were to do something like quit drinking, quit smoking. And he gently said, and it was, that voice that time was stern, but so loving, so protective, so kind. But the words he said to me were, I told you to quit, now quit.
Oh, God.
And that was on April 19th, 2009 at 9:15 a.m. Now,
Wow.
you don't remember that kind of stuff if it's not God, right?
Exactly.
And so the great part about that story is it's very hard. Women have a very hard time quitting smoking. They really do.
Oh, really?
And,
Women do?
women do. And about 6 weeks later, the doc calls me and he says, hey, are you still not smoking? And I'm like, I will never smoke again. I just knew that was it, and God had spoken, and that was it. And he's like, well, tell me what happened in that room. He goes, I need to have a come to Jesus meeting, and I'm going to go set my x-ray room.
I love it.
And so what's nice about that is the word of God. It's seeding, and I just love that. And
Planting seeds.
yes, planting seeds. And you know what? The Bible tells us some people plant, some people water, some people harvest, and so I just do the next thing that God puts in front of me, whatever that may be, and go on to the next thing. I no longer try to hang on and do it all because.
Oh, good. Oh, that's good advice.
Yeah.
I had the similar, my first year of sobriety. When did I quit? Oh, my baby brother who had a lot of problems in life, and he was involved in he never tried hard drugs, and then he tried it for the third time, and I found his body. I was not quite a year sober. It was the first year I was sober. It was December 1st, 1995. So I got sober in 94, and I remember thinking I could never get my mother through this, but I was smoking. I started smoking a lot after I got sober because I was replacing. I have this joke I wrote. I used to smoke, I used to drink, now I'm using lasagna to cover my feelings. So it's like, it's just another substitute. It's addiction that keeps you kind of distracted. And I was smoking a pack a day almost. And I remember thinking, my brother just died. I'm going to quit smoking. And I went to a meeting and I shared about his death. And it was a tragic moment because he had died of a drug overdose December 1st around the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. And then his girlfriend that he had for 10 years, they had broken up, but they were still in love with each other. She was at Neiman Marcus in Dallas as a vice president. She said, I can't believe Paul's dead. She got in a car and drove through the snow through Denver to get to California to come to his funeral. And she was drinking the whole way. And she had a head-on car accident, and she killed an entire family, an 8-year-old boy and herself, on the way to my brother's funeral. And I remember sharing at this meeting, and I was so full of this amazing Godshots. I'd had so many miracles in my life the first year. I was so almost buzzing with this pink cloud. And I remember thinking, but how come I can't quit smoking? And I surrendered it that night. And it took me 3 days to get it out of my body. I was really rude to people in public. I remember giving the finger to someone in a bookstore. I went, what kind? And a woman from Bel Air Presbyterian Church turned around and saw me, a woman that my children, she was a Sunday school teacher for my kids. And I was giving the finger. And I went, this isn't me. And then I quit. I completely have never craved a cigarette since. And a month later, I had to do a movie in which I had to smoke and play a heroin addict at a bar and smoke a pack of Marlboro Reds. And I did that, and I never went back to smoking. So it was kind of a miracle. But anyway, my whole story is a longer one about that. But that's a miracle that you gave it up and you heard that voice.
Yes, again. And I have one other one, and I think when I'm telling these, I know I'm not unique. I mean, I'm not unique. They happen to everybody. But I think that we have to recognize what they are, take the time to listen, to discover. And so I've seen God in so many facets. Okay. I've seen the loving, go to AA, quit smoking. And then I also saw the power. And that was kind of frightening. And I'll tell you the story. I mean, it was frightening for me because I was so irreverent. But my next door neighbor had gotten breast cancer, and she kind of isolated after it happened, and she was doing chemo, and she wasn't coming out of her house, and the typical sickness, hair loss, weight gain, all of it. She was having it, but she wasn't talking to anybody. So this one particular night, she called me about 6 to 8 weeks into that journey, and she said, can you come over and pray with me? I'm like, absolutely. So I dropped everything. I remember it was winter. I went next door to her house, and we sat in her living room for probably 2 hours, and she was in an oversized chair, and I sat on the couch, and we read the Bible. We talked about scriptures. We talked about our family. We talked about death and the fear and the chemo journey, and we just talked about everything and prayed. And after about 2 hours, she was getting tired, and so I said, may I pray with you before I leave here? And she goes, absolutely. And I said, please don't get up. I'm going to kneel right beside your chair. At that point in time, she had never mentioned to me that she had a chemo burn on her arm from her wrist to her elbow, right? Now, if you don't know what a chemo burn is, it's very caustic. It's like that poison, they're putting it in the vein of the antecubital space, goes under the skin. And so it basically burns you from the inside out, and you lose your skin, and you have skin grafts, right? And she was scheduled for a skin graft the next day, which she hadn't told me, but when I sat down, kneeled down, she pulled her sleeve up and I saw the arm. And this is exactly what I did. So here I am ready to pray. And I said, you just shut your eyes. I said, I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to pray. And I started thanking God for allowing us to come together, just the whole Thanksgiving thing. And then I got kind of snotty. And I said, and you know what? I said, I'm not real happy here. I said, we just spent 2 hours talking about you, reading your word, putting you in the center of things. We always do. She's going through chemo, which is nothing. I'm like, a chemo burn? Really? I said, you can heal it just like this. I said, why aren't you? And I left it at that. She kind of chuckled and she goes, only you would pray like that. You know what? I'm very authentic. There is nothing about me that I'm going to hold back, right?
Love that.
And
Yeah.
so we went on, we prayed a little bit more and I left. Well, the next morning, my bedroom's upstairs, my office is down here. I come down and there's an email from her in my inbox, which I figured, okay, she's going to be saying thank you. I open it up and it says, thanks for coming over last night. The chemo burn is gone. Gone. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So,
Oh my God. Oh my
but
God.
here's the best thing. Like immediately when I read that, Lydia, I was like, and I felt so irreverent for the way I had spoken to my higher power. I ran from my office up the stairs on my knees beside my bed sobbing, saying, I am so sorry. You are so real. And this is like, I should have never talked to you like that.
Oh, that's
and
really cute.
And it was really, I mean, I just felt the power. I felt God's power. And so for anybody that's struggling, it's a millisecond. And here's the best part of that story. So she goes for her skin graft appointment. The doctor comes in. He was an atheist, right? He's like, let me see your arm so we can see what we're going to graft. And she pulls up her sleeve. And he's like, no, I need to see the arm with the chemo burn. And she goes, that's it.
Oh my God.
And so he's sitting there going, wait a minute. So he looks at both arms. He calls in all the residents, all the physicians that are working, all the nurses that are there that are preparing for the surgery. He goes, tell them the story. So she tells everybody the story about what happened the night before with me praying and saying whatever. And he looks at her and he's like, he goes, is your neighbor a witch? And she's like, no, she's not a witch. She's a nurse practitioner. And here was the thing. So when everybody exited the room, that one nurse stayed and told my friend, you have no idea how many seeds you just planted, especially for that doctor that has no explanation for what he just witnessed. And he doesn't necessarily have a belief in God yet. So it's really odd how God will use things to just keep spreading messages.
It's not just, oh my gosh. I was raised in a metaphysical religion that I didn't understand, but it was putting God as all in all. God is all and all good all the time. And there's no opposing force to good. And if they didn't believe in the Adam and Eve myth, they thought it was a parable, which made duality real, which made good and evil real. But if you start with Genesis 1, God created us in his image and likeness. So there is no opposing force. And if you think that way, that's how Christ healed, actually. He didn't look at the evil and the withered hand. He saw only perfection. He saw God's eye view. That's how and it's so simple to heal that way. I'm not kidding. I've had many people in this particular religion, which I couldn't understand for years. And I finally went back to study it. And it really just is the premise that all is good. God is all good and evil is powerful here on this earthly plane when we focus on it intensely and we make it real. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Why are we putting cancer ahead of God? Why are we're running relay races in cancer's name. We're making it a huge God. We're making every allergy a God. We're giving it so much attention. We're empowering our enemies. And I love the quote. I think I came up with this somewhere. I thought I read it somewhere, but I couldn't find it by anyone else. And I've written it for years. Withdraw your attention from your enemies and they expire from neglect, which means our worries and our fears are our enemies often. So a disease, when I look at I've had women and people in this other religion I talked about, a lot of friends, cured of leukemia, blindness. A man was completely blind and he refused to accept it. Another friend was called paralyzed from the waist down from a boating accident. And his 16-year-old brain, he was an athlete. He was a very, very active athlete, a football player and a boating guy and a water skier. He couldn't accept the picture. The doctor said to him, "You'll never walk again." His mind wouldn't accept it. And sure enough, 6 months later, he walked. He's fine.
Yes.
But it's just that we allow into our brain so many false beliefs and thoughts. They take over. You have to train your mind like a dog. You wouldn't let your dog pee all over the furniture. You don't let your mind run around, with crazy ideas. So we keep our thoughts on God and God's thoughts.
Yeah.
And healing is a byproduct of a lifting of our thoughts toward God's thoughts.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a higher plane of existence.
Yeah.
And I love your story. I love that you had that miracle healing.
It's amazing. It was amazing. And that's what gives,
God.
I know. And it just seems like every day there's an opportunity to see a God shot, see somebody have one, be part of one. And it just, to me, is just the most fabulous journey ever. I get excited. Excited to say, what's next? What's next? Just like a little child,
Me too.
And maybe that's why the Bible says, unless you're like a little child, you can't come to me. So it's kind of like, you know what? I'm good with playing like this. I'm okay.
I became childlike when I got sober. I became obsessed with butterflies. I don't know when that came out of the blue. When I was in the darkest depression, 2 huge swallowtail butterflies circled my head. And I was sitting on my front yard grieving the end of my marriage. And suddenly I was snapped out of my misery by this beauty. And I began thinking, well, I've read all these things. Maybe they're my father and my brother who had both died.
Yeah.
And I just I just started chasing butterflies. It's a metaphor for loving the beauty in life. And if you seek the beauty, you'll find it everywhere.
Yes.
Gratitude is the activator. Gratitude. I started being grateful. Like when I can't get out of my old bad mood, I think of 5 things to be grateful for. That's a quick way. Gratitude is a form of prayer.
That's a super great idea. Yeah.
But there's so many mysteries that there's left to discover, so many Godshots to share. And I'm looking forward to sharing them with you and bringing them out to people and talking about them publicly and maybe starting a show like we're doing.
That would be fun. Yes.
Like a weekly show. Yeah. We should be inspiring people more.
And I think that our world is so busy, and especially now with this virus, and it's so random. I mean, people aren't really understanding what's going on with the virus, and it's like our lives are so busy and work is so busy and people are so busy, and now we're going to homeschool and we're going to do a lot of things. And I just think that this is a nice opportunity for people to hear the other side, instead of, because I just feel like, maybe it's a lot of doom and gloom right now in our world. And that was my thought when I was putting that website together. I'm like, there's a lot of beauty here. If we can just find it and look at it and capture it and share it. And like I said, I'm not unique. And and I just feel that if I have this happen, so many people do. Maybe they don't have a platform to talk about it,
right.
And so I would like to help with that.
And I'd like to collect more Godshots. Other people have had them and they don't know what they're called or where to put them, what category. I've been collecting them for years. So I have, like you, hundreds of them.
Yes.
And I think we should put them together and start really sharing these and try to get people to share them with us.
Yeah, I think that would be fabulous.
Life is a miracle.
It is. And I was 27 years old when I had my first one. And my very first one, of course, I didn't know what to call it. And I just thought it was odd. But I was at that point in time, I was only a registered nurse. And I was in an office in Pittsburgh. I had gone in for my own appointment. And my mom was with me, thank goodness, because I just felt like my whole body was falling apart. I was actually under a lot of stress with 3 children and the marriage I was in, a lot of things were going on. But I was having heart palpitations and all this stuff at the age of 27, which a lot of 20, 30-year-olds that are in, with 3 children and in that type of thing, trying to work, you can understand that
Oh,
anxiety.
bless them.
But when I went to this doctor's office, this was the weirdest thing. Like, he was multi-degreed, and so he was looking at me psychologically as well as physically and endocrinology and all of it, right? Cardiology. And at the end of the day, he said, all your tests are negative. You're good. You're healthy. You've got to release some of this stress somehow. And I'm out by his office clerk paying my bill. And this doctor who I just met walks up to me and says, the lady in room 2 wants to see you. Well, I'm completely out of town. I don't know any people that live there. I'm like, me? And he's like, yeah, you. And he walked away. So I went to room 2. I knock on the door. I open it. She's like, come in. I open it, and there was this little lady. Now, I'm 27. She's probably 80. And she's sitting on the table. And the only thing I remember, she had a little crooked finger. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I said, I don't know you. I said, I guess you must have the wrong person. And she goes, no. She goes, I want to talk to you. And I looked at her and I'm like, do I know you? And she goes, no. She goes, but I'm a visionary. I didn't even know what that meant. I said, what's a visionary? And she goes, I pray to God every morning, and he gives me a vision of somebody that I'm supposed to pray with, right? So she's like, may I pray with you? And I'm like kind of weirded out by the whole thing. Actually, at that age, I'm going, well, I guess. So she goes, let's hold hands. We held hands. She prayed. First time in my life, the spirit, like my feet started getting very, very, very hot, and it just came up through my body and went out through my head. Wow. And when she was done praying, I kind of looked at her and I was like, what did you just do to me? Like, I had never had that experience, right? And she goes, what happened? And I told her, she goes, honey, that was the Holy Spirit. She goes, God is with you. God knows you're okay. You're okay. Let go of the fear and the anxiety. Yeah. So God always has us covered.
Always.
Whether we realize it or whether we don't.
It's like a shadow on the wall. It's like the sun is always shining, whether the curtains are closed or not. I mean, during the daytime. But a shadow on the wall isn't the real evidence. The shadow is simply blocking the sun temporarily.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's really beautiful that she prayed with you. There's so many mysteries of the universe that we're not willing to open our hearts to yet. Some people are I have a lot of people that are resistant. Mm-hmm. They don't like the word God. And I remember I was afraid to use the word God to offend people now that's not what I want to do, but I'm saying there are people who absolutely run away from it because they were raised in a very, very fundamentalist or fear and punishing religion, a religion that taught them that God is a fearsome God. Yes. And that's not it at all. Right. God is love. It's pure love and good orderly direction. And sometimes you have to start talking to people in a different way, by attraction, not promotion, and showing the miracles. I was one of those people that was just a child. I came alive when I got sober. I felt like I was born again. Mm-hmm. And I became a child. I became childlike in my glee and joy. And I'm still that way. And I've had some rough years where I forgot. I have some years where I didn't focus on the good, and I watched my life become small. And the minute I turn away from that and go back to the beauty, the minute I turn my eye to God again, it's instant. You don't have to sit there and mourn over the fact that you wasted time. Now is the time of salvation. This very moment we have. It's all we really have right now. And the universe is interactive. It wants to play with us. It wants to show off for us. But we're so focused on the future and the past that we're never in the present moment enough to appreciate all the beauty that's right here in front of us. Right here. It's this day.
You're absolutely correct about that.
Wow. And I feel like our lives are miracles. We're walking miracles. But to see evidence of a chemo burn disappearing, or someone coming back from cancer and leukemia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get to see a lot of different versions of everything. And and I think it's just keeping on and realizing. I think you said a really great point, Lydia, when you talked about the fearsome God, because I was
Mm.
raised that way. I mean, I
Oh.
was raised to, this statement that my grandparents used, and they spoke Russian, and it was like, Bush's gonna get you. And so I always thought God was gonna get me. I wasn't sure what he was gonna get, but I was always a little bit afraid. And
Yeah.
so I'm certainly glad that God has seen fit, or my higher power, whatever you want to call it, because like I said, I was afraid of God, and when I went into the rooms, I realized it could be a higher power. And I realized after being in those rooms for a period of time, and I don't know how long I was actually there, that was a gift. Now, it
Mm.
wasn't what I expected it to be. Back in the day when I got sober, it was dark, dank basement rooms that you got to smoke in. you
Oh.
know,
Yeah.
a lot of cigarettes. But you know what? He was there speaking through every single person that I listened to. And the amazing journey that I've had with people that I've met all over the world, sharing stories with me. It's just a great journey. It's just a really great journey. And I'm
Wow,
glad to be sharing it with you.
you seem like such a happy person, and so vibrant and radiant. And that's, I think, because you're allowing the force to work through you. When I get out of my own way and I get my ego out of the way, and I call that edging God out, ego,
Yes.
my whole day goes better. I'm wearing the world as a loose garment.
Yes.
And that, that phrase. Um, it's such a miraculous journey. And I can go from, I remember being really obsessed lately with, I had 3 years of a really bad time, the past 3 years, taking care of my parents and having a fight with a family member that was very bizarre. And I began analyzing it and looking at psychologists and psychiatrists, and I forgot to go to God with it. And the minute I stopped looking at the problem and just turned love to this person, I kept returning love for hate. Every time I was tempted to be angry at her or retaliate, the past year, I've done contrary action, the very opposite of what my mortal brain wanted to do. I began to think, what kind of kindness can I give? How can I just shower her with love? And it has changed everything. And it's weird that I had to learn that lesson all over again. I knew this intellectually, but I had to experience it myself to just give up the fight and to stop fighting my enemies, stop thinking I had an enemy.
And you know what that reminds, and I don't do that perfectly by a long shot, because because I really tend to, like, when somebody's being nasty, I want to be nasty back and one up them and be like, hey, you know what, this is really what happened.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you're talking about scripture again, where scripture comes in and says, turn the other cheek.
Exactly.
That's a hard thing to do. And I
So
think that
hard.
this type of conversation, this Godshots, these types of connections are really valuable. I have people in my we, if you will, that I call when I get like that, because I'm like, I can't do it. I can't be nice to this person. And
Yes.
then they talk me through it, and it's back to the gratitude and back. Oh, my favorite saying, not really, but I mean, something that my sponsor says all the time. Would you rather be happy, or would you rather be right?
Right.
And sometimes I'm like, I would just rather be right.
I love that.
Yeah.
I've got to remember that more often.
Yeah, right.
Self-righteousness. You can't really convince anybody of anything through words as much as through silent love. I always define prayer as the invisible transfer of love to another. It's a softer way to explain.
Love that.
Yeah, because a lot of, I'm not kidding, I have a lot of people that are very, whenever I use the word God, I have a one guy in particular who's a Facebook friend, and he says, Lydia, please stop using the word God. It's very offensive to me. And I went, please just open your heart a little bit and realize, substitute the word love,
Yeah.
divine love, or the force of love, the power of love, or just simply the gentle presence of peace. And we have to just somehow, I guess, not badger people with it, but
Yeah.
lead by our stories. Our
Right.
stories are evidence. I have evidence. I have
Yes.
evidence of absolute spine tingling miracles. And then I'm beginning to believe that miracles are actually natural law. If you really are aligned with the Spirit of God, it's a natural law to experience miracles every day. We shouldn't think of them as things that are making nature, setting aside nature or natural
Right.
law. It is natural law to experience peace and harmony and love for your fellow man,
Right. I
and to
agree.
really, yeah, and to walk in another's shoes and to feel their pain. I feel that's often important too. We all come from such varied backgrounds. We really can't know each other's pain.
And when you say that, it reminds me of the story that it stayed with me for the past 16 years about the blue baby. And I don't know if you've ever heard that story,
Tell
but
me,
that,
tell us.
what my sponsor tried to get across to me, picture yourself in a brand new car, brand new shiny car you just spent $28,000 on, and you're driving on the highway and somebody comes flying past you at a very fast rate, jumps back in front of you, damages your car, and now you're angry because you're like, you're not getting away with this. And you start chasing them, right? And so you're
Yeah.
chasing the car on the highway, on the side streets, trying to just get them to stop because they're going to pay for this car that they just damaged. And you follow them right into the emergency room parking lot and they pull a blue baby out of the back seat.
Oh my God.
So now how mad are you at that person for what they did? There's always a reason why something,
Oh,
yeah. And so anytime somebody does something to me that aggravates me, I try to think, sometimes I'm walking around going, blue baby, blue baby.
oh
'Cause
wow, that's beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
That's
So
like the man who wrote the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
yes,
He wrote about the win-win, and he said if you were in line impatiently waiting for some jerk at the front of the line who's taking so much time, he can't seem to get his order right or whatever, and if you knew that person had just lost their wife that day and his little children were at home alone, would you be as rude and impatient as you are? He's
right,
trying to make you think of the blue baby. Always
right.
think of how you can make people feel more gentle and more calm. And even in driving in traffic in LA, my son once said to me, Mom, why are you trying to scoot through traffic so fast? Why don't you just drive at a normal pace? It makes everyone around you feel more comfortable. And sure enough, I got there just as fast. My son even came up with that one. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
yeah.
And this story, you just reminded me of another Godshot that I had when my sister-in-law was in the hospital dying of cancer. She had asked me, her feet were swelling. I mean, she was in the end stages and it was just a few more days before she passed. But I went, the nurses told me, go to Walmart, pick up this certain cream that you can rub on her feet that will really help her feel better as she's swelling. So I went
Mm.
to Walmart. I'll never forget this. And I was in line and I was someplace else mentally. You're talking about the person in the front of the line, right? And I was just thinking, and I'm standing there holding this cream, and everybody in front of me had gone, and I'm holding up everybody behind me because I'm just standing there staring off into space, right?
Yeah.
And this one guy says, "Are you going to go?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm so sorry." And I got up to the counter, and the lady directly behind me takes off this necklace, undoes it, and hands me a key, and just a little skeletal key, little one, that I still have on a chain to this very day. And I looked at her and she goes, "I want you to have this." And she hands me this key, don't know who she was, don't know anything about her. And I look at this little skeletal key. She goes, "Wear this key and always remember that kindness is the key." And then when I
Oh, I
looked at her
love
shirt,
that.
she had a pink ribbon for cancer on the front of her shirt.
Oh
And I
my
just kind of
God.
looked at her and told her thank you. And I wear that a lot. And people will say, "Where
Beautiful.
that old key?" I'm like, because kindness is the key,
Oh
and I
my
have to
God.
remember that.
That is the most beautiful story. I have tears in my eyes. This is such a beautiful talk.
It really
I'm
is.
so grateful to know you. I have so many stories you reminded me of that I can't wait to share with you about financial God shots when I was at my wit's end with money, and out of the blue, so many miracles happened with that. And other people's God shots and after death
Yes,
God shots. And so we have
yes,
a lot more to talk about, but what a
absolutely.
beautiful conversation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is just really exciting to me, and I'm
Me
excited.
too.
talk to others and incorporate people into this. And yeah, you're a
I'm
lovely
so
person.
happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had no idea you had had so many beautiful, beautiful stories that, I mean, I love your website. It's called Godshots 360, right?
Yes. Yes.
Godshots360.com.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
And we're going to start setting up a Godshots show and podcast. It'll be more regular. But do you think we should separate these into sections, like, or just go with the flow like we are today? I kind of
I
like
think
this.
going with the flow is fabulous, you
I do
know,
too.
and I think that God will work the rest of it out.
I do too.
So yeah, and
Do you have any other things yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think your idea of being able to put something together like this and allowing people to hear it and saying, what do you think? Is this God or not?
Oh,
You know?
that's exactly how I was going to start the show. Is
Yeah.
you decide, are these miracles or just mere coincidence? You decide.
Yes, I
Because
love that.
because the evidence is so overwhelming that I
Yes.
know there is something way bigger than what we're doing in this little tiny earthly plane or in our little lives when we're focused on problems. And
Yes.
the solution is always when I look away from the problem. And I go back to Einstein because he said, no problem can be solved at the same level it was created on. You have to go to a higher solution. So
Yes.
that means you can't fight fire with fire. You can't cure alcoholism with more alcohol or drugs. It doesn't, that's replacement. And you can't really solve war with bombs. You have to go to diplomacy. With alcoholism, you have to go to a spiritual solution, which is
Yes.
kind of bizarre when you think about it, that prayer and group fellowship and sharing our pain, you share your pain, you cut it in half, share your joy, you double it. There's
Yes.
something about when two or more are gathered in my name, there I am.
In the
And I
center.
am
Yes.
the great I am, meaning
There's
God, not.
there's so much power. There's so much power here. And I just think that the time is right. I mean, I think that people are hurting and searching, and the answer is always in the search. So yeah,
Seeking.
this is a good time. Great time.
I love you. You're such a wonderful woman. I'm so thrilled to know you. And
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
yeah, so we're going to do this hopefully every week. We're going to set up a
Awesome.
schedule. Yeah.
Okay. That's
Okay.
perfect.